Welcome to Breakthrough Weekly. I'm your host, Monica Pelayo. If you're new here, thank you for being here. And if you've been coming back week after week, I appreciate you. This podcast is where we break down subconscious patterns, identity shifts, and the deeper work behind real transformation. If these conversations resonate with you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episode. All right, let's get into today's conversation. When you know you're capable, but you still find yourself procrastinating, hesitating, or losing momentum, it can be deeply frustrating. Most people assume this means they need more discipline, more effort. But in reality, momentum often stalls because focus is anchored to cost, discomfort, and uncertainty instead of payoff and direction. Procrastination is rarely a lack of motivation. Most people procrastinate because their attention keeps getting pulled toward effort, discomfort, uncertainty, fear, instead of the outcome they actually want. And the mind always moves in the direction of what it focuses on. At this point, labels like laziness get applied, but that label completely misses what actually is happening beneath the surface. The mind does not make decisions based on logic first. It makes decisions based on imagined experience. Whatever you imagine most vividly is what your nervous system responds to. If imagination is filled with negative scenarios, the emotional response follows immediately. And those emotions alert the brain. The emotional signal then dictates behavior. This is not weakness, this is how the mind works. The brain does not distinguish between something vividly imagined and something actually experienced. If you imagine discomfort, failure, loss, emotional pain, the emotional response follows immediately. And from the brain's perspective, emotional pain equals threat. Brain's number one job is survival. Pain signals danger. Danger signals risk to life. So when thoughts repeatedly create emotional pain, the brain shifts into protection mode to keep you safe. Protecting can show up as hesitation, avoidance, procrastination, self-sabotage. Not because you're incapable, but because the brain believes it's protecting your life. At the same time, if the future you want is vague, unclear, barely imagined, the brain has nothing equally compelling to move toward. So it prioritizes protection over progress. What you imagine shapes the emotional signal, and the emotional signal tells the brain whether to protect or proceed. Emotion directs behavior, and emotion is created by thought. Here's one of the rules of the mind. Every thought creates a blueprint that the brain follows. Let's use public speaking as an example. Imagine you're about to step onto a stage. In your mind, the picture yourself stuttering, forgetting what you want to say, freezing, being judged. Immediately, your heart rate increases. Your breathing becomes shallow. Cortisol and adrenaline spike. Those emotions are not random. They're the result of the blueprint your thoughts just created. Because emotional pain is interpreted as threat, fear pushes the brain into survival mode. And once the brain shifts to fight or flight, the logical part of the mind, where memory, speech, and clear thinking live, temporarily narrows. That narrowing is not failure. It's the brain executing the blueprint it was given. The result becomes exactly what you imagine. Mental fog, forgetting what you rehearsed, difficult speaking clearly. Here's what happened. The thought created the emotional state. The emotional state activated survival mode. Survival mode dictated behavior. Behavior produced the outcome. Not because you were incapable, but because the blueprint told the brain that experience to create. This is where most people unknowingly lose momentum. At any moment, your focus lives in one of two places. You're either focused on the process, effort, work, discomfort, uncertainty, fear, or you're focused on the outcome, clarity, relief, freedom, fulfillment, the life you want. The brain cannot fully focus on both at the same time. What you consistently focus on becomes what your mindset treats as real, and behavior organizes around that belief. I experienced this clearly while running a marathon. For me, that wall hit around mile 20. I have asthma. By that point, my body was exhausted, my breathing was heavy, my legs were done. Running wasn't possible anymore, so I shifted into fast walking just to keep moving forward. There is pain, discomfort, uncertainty. What kept me moving had nothing to do with the pain disappearing. It had everything to do where my focus stayed. I was focused on crossing the finish line. I kept visualizing the moment, the relief, the accomplishment, the payoff of finishing what I committed to. As I got closer, I slowed down even more. At one point, I told myself, even if I have to crawl across that line, I will cross it. I used my inhaler, I was prepared, I managed what I could, and I kept moving because the outcome mattered more than the discomfort. There will always be effort, there will always be discomfort, there will always be uncertainty. What determines whether you keep going is not the absence of pain, it's whether the payoff is clear enough to stay focused. When focus stays on the outcome becomes the motivation. Language is not just motivational, it's mechanical. The words you use create thoughts. Those thoughts become mental images. The brain turns language into visualization. And because the brain cannot tell the difference between something vividly imagined and something real, those images are experienced as if they're happening now. That experience produces emotion, and emotion drives action. The sequence is simple. Words create thoughts, thoughts create images, images generate emotion, emotion directs behavior. The words you repeat determine what the brain rehearses, and what the brain rehearses becomes a blueprint it follows. If you say, "This is difficult," the brain creates images of strain and struggle. The emotional response contracts. Energy pulls inward, the nervous system shifts toward protection. If you say, "This is challenging," the image changes. A challenge implies growth, engagement, purpose. Energy becomes available for action. Nothing about the situation changed, only the language did. Language doesn't describe your experience, it directs it. Momentum begins with focus. When attention stays on the outcome and the payoff, the brain gains clarity and direction. With direction, movement follows. Challenges don't disappear, they simply stop being the center of attention. Where focus goes, energy flows. If you recognize yourself in this capable, aware, but still circling the same patterns, that's not a discipline issue. It's usually a subconscious focus pattern that needs to shift. I work with people who are ready to move from survival-driven thinking to outcome-driven identity. If you want to explore what's been driving your hesitation or procrastination beneath the surface, you can book a complimentary discovery call. It's a focused conversation to understand where you are, what you want to move toward, and whether subconscious work using hypnosis and RDT methods are the right fit for you. You can schedule that at thethrivingpathways.com/appointment. I'll also include the link in the show notes. Thank you for staying with me through this episode of Breakthrough Weekly. If this resonated, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next conversation. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. I'll see you next time.